Well, now that the reaction to Interspecies review is finally out, I think it's high time I finally got around to actually reviewing the show, so let's... The hell? I think that's my you gotta see this alarm. Adventure Time, plus a podcast, plus acid. Wait, what? That's a thing? The Midnight Gospel? I've never heard of this until now. Oh, it's a Netflix show. That's weird. Normally I know all the Netflix shows that came out. I may not watch all of them, but I'm at least aware of them. Okay, fine. I'll be fair and give this my 3-episode college try. 3 episodes later. Yeah, Interspecies reviewer can wait. Sorry, but this has to take precedence. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Watchful's Watchings. So, where do we even begin with this show? Well, I guess with a little backstory. The Midnight Gospel is the love child of Duncan Trussell, I hope I'm saying that right, an up-and-coming comedian with his own podcast series as well as being on podcasts himself. I honestly never even heard of the guy until this, but I kinda wanna know more about him after this show. However, the name you might be much more familiar with is a little man by the name of Pendleton Ward, someone who only created one of Cartoon Network's biggest shows, Adventure Time. Yeah, off that alone, I was definitely gonna give this show a chance. So with all that out of the way, what is the Midnight Gospel actually about? Well, it follows this pink human, yes, he's a human, as he has his own virtual reality computer system that he uses to go into the virtual world into several different Earths, each one with their own stories, societies, and people. So what does Clancy actually do with this computer? Well, he makes a podcast series out of it.
Brilliant! Brilliant!
And I would honestly totally do the same thing with my YouTube channel if I had this power. And maybe I do low-key like this show because it's about a YouTuber. Or maybe it was just one of the main aspects that kept me watching at the very least. The other might be something you're noticing right now, the animation itself. I mean, holy cow, just look at this. Is it actually possible to be both cheap and beautiful at the same time? Because this show is saying yes. And let's not mince words here, the actual animation itself is incredibly cheap. Right down to all the characters having a lower frame rate than usual. Seriously, characters will jolt, expand, and move in a very cartoony fashion, but because of the low frame rate, it feels very jarring and abnormal. Not to mention the character designs themselves, while having a very Pendleton Ward style to them. Seriously, a lot of these characters look straight from Adventure Time. A lot of them still feel pretty mild. Hell, even Clancy's avatars, the most creative one is probably the one in the 3rd episode. Everyone else is just either a variant on a human or completely abstract. Now, it sounds like I'm criticizing the show right off the bat, but believe it or not, I think it works incredibly well here. Why is that? 2 words, visual consistency. The incredibly weird squash and stretch combined with the low frame rate animation and the character designs all work to its favor to create a very consistent style. A very consistent style that fits incredibly well with the world and the stories it's trying to convey. Everything has a sort of surrealistic style and presence to it. I know the obvious joke is that you have to be on drugs to enjoy this, but no, I have to disagree with that. Or at the very least, I don't entirely think it's just a matter of drugs. Oh boy, how do I explain this? Okay, you ever hear about those drug trips where people have deep philosophical discussions? And I don't mean the you ever wonder how your fingers can't touch themselves kind of deep. No, I mean actual literal deep conversations. The kinds that deal with deep and dark subject matters like death and mortality and even meditation and stuff like that. So the surrealistic art style, direction, and animation actually adds to the surrealistic dialogue. And yeah, speaking of the dialogue, that's another thing you're gonna notice immediately about this show from the very first episode. While a lot of the dialogue tries to follow the story that's being told around them, it feels way too calm and collected for what's being portrayed. But then you kind of remember, wait a minute, this is set up like a podcast, this makes sense. In fact, I think a lot of the dialogue was actually taken from podcasts Duncan Trussell was on. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of the humor comes from. Just these calm philosophical conversations taking place during complete insanity. Like just as an example, the very first episode could have Clancy going to a world in a zombie apocalypse and interviewing the president about the pros and cons of drug use, where he stands on it and his views on drugs in general while being chased by zombies and avoiding a zombie apocalypse. Or maybe like the 3rd episode where he goes to a planet entirely made of water and joins a boat of a fishman in a fish tank who is apparently a devout follower of magic. And while he's talking about this, he can be in a world using cats as currency to get a magical device, to then go to the god of that world and try to overthrow him by taking his form.
I have so many questions!
Okay, yeah, fair point. It is a very hard show to talk about because, as weird as it's gonna sound, it's a show that kind of needs to be actually experienced and not talked about. I mean, you saw me just now. When you try to describe the show, it just devolves into complete non sequitur nonsense. I mean, to be fair, Pendleton Ward, so that's kind of to be expected considering his last outing was Adventure Time. But what makes it doubly weird is that there is an underlining overarching story throughout the whole series. And a lot of it does center around Clancy basically coming to terms with the fact that he was an awful person. Okay, this is the point of the show where I have to talk about spoilers, so fair warning. Basically, we get hints about Clancy owing money to his sister, how basically she lent him money so that he could get a new home somewhere under the condition that he didn't waste the money. But guess what? He wasted it by buying the virtual computer, and basically under the guise of I'm gonna make an awesome podcast by using this computer and I'm gonna pay you back. However, it's painfully obvious that Clancy is incredibly selfish. His spacecast is literally going nowhere despite God knows how many attempts to try and get it off the ground. On top of that, not only is his sister demanding the money back, but his own computer requires constant maintenance that he's outright ignoring. Which I suppose that could be my one and only nitpick with the show, is that Clancy is really unlikable. Like, almost despicably unlikable. And there's no indication that he's just stupid, he's just lazy and irresponsible. Hell, his sister is literally willing to call off the debt but just wants to talk to him and he blows up in her face. He is literally unwilling to accept the past and worry about the present and doesn't even care about the future. However, the reason I say this is a nitpick is because, well, for one thing, the show makes it painfully obvious that he is in the wrong for all of this. That this kind of behavior is not okay and he does get put down for it. And the other reason is that he as a character does grow and get better as the series goes on. He does genuinely learn to be more compassionate and understanding by the end of the series, even if it's in his own way without compromising his laid-back personality. And all of that comes to a head with the final episode. And seriously guys, omega level spoilers here because I don't want to spoil this for any of you. Because honest to God, the ending of this show more than makes up for it and honestly makes it probably one of my favorite things to come out of this year. Okay, so in the final episode, Clancy basically talks to his own mother, and it's heavily implied that both of his parents are dead. Hell, it's outright stated in the last episode that his father is definitely dead. So there's heavy implication that he's basically talking to his dead mother. But you don't really focus on that, you focus on the fact that he's basically interviewing his mother while being a baby. And slowly they both start to age as the episode goes on. But after Clancy's mother is reborn, things kind of take a very dark turn as we find out his mother has cancer, and the rest of the episode is basically talking about how you come to terms with the woman who birthed you dying. And for those that don't know, the audio from this episode was actually taken from a podcast Duncan Trussell did with his mother, who passed away less than 3 weeks after the audio was recorded. So in a way, this is an episode talking about someone you love from beyond the grave who you feel left you too soon. And it asks the question, how do you move on from something like that? And basically, this is where all the questions from the previous episodes come into play. Questions on mortality, questions on death. And basically, Clancy's mother basically says, you cry and accept it no matter how hard it may be. And when you lose someone you love, of course it's gonna hurt. It's gonna always hurt. But it's also not healthy to think, I could have done something else. I could have tried better. I could have been there. No, you couldn't have. It's okay to cry. In fact, it's better to cry than to dwell and to think on things. To wonder if you could have done things differently. To wonder if you could have helped more. And right at that moment, I wept. I shed a tear, and I have no shame in saying that. And honestly, for the ending alone, I cannot recommend The Midnight Gospel enough. Is it trippy as all hell? Yes. But is it beautiful? Also yes. In fact, it's an oh god yes. And what sucks is that next to no one I know is talking about this show. I see next to no reviews of this over on YouTube, so please, I am begging all of you, go honest to god give this show a watch and tell other people to give it a watch. And if they're skeptical, well, tell them to give my review a shot and maybe that'll convince them. Just give it a watch. I guarantee you by the end of the show you will not be disappointed. Hell, you might even cry like I did. Because The Midnight Gospel, while looking trippy and surreal, also captures genuine heart and emotion. It shows genuine understanding for these dark subject matters and shows genuine love and understanding for things. And honestly, in a time like this where you know what is going around, I think we can use messages like the ones in this show. And I can think of no better way to end this than letting the show say it for itself.
You mind if I interview you for my, am I dead?
Just be here now. Just be here now.
My loyal watchers, thank you all so much for checking this video out. I apologize if certain bits weren't as well executed or well thought out as they could have been, but honestly, I just really wanted to get this out there and talk about this show. So I hope people genuinely want to give this show a chance now that they've seen this review. And I promise guys, next time the Interspecies review will definitely come out. And if you want to help me keep content like that and this much more consistent on the channel, I do have a Patreon. In fact, as this episode goes up, voting for the next month's episode will be up there right now. And it only costs a measly $10 a month. And of course all the usual stuff, Twitch and Twitter and my merchandise store is down below. I'm The Watcher saying keep on watching. I'll see you guys next time.